I want to chat with you about how to navigate eating out and eating at events while trying to improve your eating habits and your nutrition. There might be a mindset out there with some people, or maybe even a lot of people, that if when life is really busy, that might as well not even try to work on your eating habits or your nutrition, because I don't know if it's the mindset that you can only try and work on those things when life is perfect or when life slows down, or even I have so many events and so many moments where I'm going to be eating out coming up that I might as well not work on my nutrition. I'm going to wait until life is slower, or it's going to be easier to work on those things, when you can improve your nutrition and your eating habits even during a season while things are busy in their events like that. Because the way I think about it is I look at big picture. Let's say you have, maybe even you have an event where you're going to be eating out, and whether that's at a restaurant or let's say like a barbecue or something, both Saturday and Sunday. Now, just because you have an event both on Saturday and Sunday doesn't mean that the rest of the day or even the rest of the week is a wash and that you might as well not do anything because of those events. Whereas honestly, like, think about the rest of the week or even the meals surrounding those events. You can work on your nutrition or your eating habits surrounding those events. Just because there's that one event in that day, or maybe there's one event on both days, doesn't mean like the meals that are on either side of that event, you can't do something to make them a little bit better. I feel like, I don't know if it's diet culture or just maybe humans and our mindset and our thoughts in general, we tend to be in this all or nothing, black and white mentality where only when, let's say, circumstances are perfect that we should be working on our nutrition and improving it. And if there's going to be any little things that might prevent us from perfectly following this perfect plan, then we might as well not do it. But the reality is probably for the rest of your life, you're going to have situations where you get invited to eat at a restaurant, you get invited to eat at a barbecue, you get invited to a birthday party or a wedding, or any of these situations like that, or even just any of these situations, or even just a random meal that maybe you planned on eating at home because you had stuff at home, but somebody invited you out to lunch and you didn't expect to do it. But you can make better, more mindful choices in these situations and circumstances. So that's where I want to chat with you about it today. Honestly, sometimes it is good for us to, in a busy season, really start to change the way we think and do nutrition and food, and really start to work on changing our behaviors and our habits, and start learning how to make habits and practices something that we can do long term, learning these foundational skills to improve our nutrition and our eating that we can take with us the rest of our lives. So let's chat, some tools and strategies that you can use for eating out, even in the midst of you, let's say, working on your nutrition, trying to improve your nutrition, your eating habits, or eating at events, like I mentioned, barbecues, weddings, etc. Some tools and strategies for how you can do that while still trying to improve your health. So, first strategy I would say is probably to plan ahead. This is a foundational, fundamental skill for improving your nutrition and your eating habits. I always think about reverse engineering what a healthy meal would look like. And so for me to have a healthy lunch that has like nutrients in it, that's going to make me feel good in my body and actually be aligned with my goals and how I want to feel, to reverse engineer that, I have to have made it. I have to have had the groceries at my house. I have had to have planned out what those groceries were and gone and got those groceries. And so I would have had to go all the way back to this planning ahead of thinking about, okay, what are some lunches that I want? What are some ingredients for those lunches? Let me go get them, let me prepare them, and then have my routine where either I make it daily or I make it weekly, so that I have these things available to me conveniently and more or less on hand. And so planning ahead. So that's just planning ahead in that scenario for having like healthy meals at my house to be able to, let's say, bring to work with me for lunch, or bring to dinner with me wherever I might go, depending on the situation and the circumstance. And oftentimes too, this is just like an aside, is that I call it, some people might call it like practical hunger or practical taste. I've had people before kind of look at some of my habits and like, oh my gosh, like you're bringing your meal prep to, let's say there's this Monday night event thing that it was every Monday. I was there for 3 hours, and it was a class that I was a part of. And so me thinking ahead, it's like, okay, I'm going to be hungry at that time. It's around dinner time. So I'm going to plan ahead to make my like dinners on Sunday night so that I have this dinner ready and available to bring with me to this class that I'm taking to eat before class starts, so that I'm not ravenous, I'm not starving. It's also going to be food that's going to help me to feel good and my body, and help me to align my habits and my practices with my goals. But then also it's practical thing. It's thinking ahead practically about like, I'm gonna need dinner at that time, so let me prepare ahead of time to have a dinner, and a healthier dinner. And it also prevents me from going out to eat. And there's two things with that prevention of going out to eat, is that it's less expensive to meal prep. Going out to eat, it's going to be way more expensive, but then also going out to eat, I'm probably going to get food that I probably don't necessarily want to have, that's probably going to not make me feel good in my body. So I plan ahead to prevent maybe some of those poor choices, but then also to help me in how I do want to feel, I guess, like in my future, if you will. But so anyway, the strategy is planning ahead. So let's say you have an event where you know you're going to be eating out, whether somebody invited you out to dinner ahead of time, or you have an event, a barbecue, etc., where you're going to possibly be eating out. And so by knowing ahead of time, like looking forward into your week that you have this event, you can plan around that event. So for example, if I know I'm going out to dinner on Friday night, I will plan ahead for that. It's like, okay, going out to dinner, I'm going to this place. Maybe I don't know what place I'm going to, but I'm probably going to want to choose something delicious and fun and enjoyable. So what I can do is I can balance out my day. I can make sure that I eat a good, nutritious, balanced meal for lunch that has lots of lean proteins and veggies and some whole grain, like high fiber carbohydrates. That's gonna make me feel good in my body. And the same with breakfast. Choose a really good breakfast that's gonna make me feel good in my body, that has nutrients and things that I enjoy, to balance out my day. And also, depending on what time of day that eat out meal or that event meal might be, you can bookend, is what I call it, that meal. Say it's like a lunchtime event, and you know you're probably going to be eating some things that maybe you don't have control what's over the menu, or maybe the menu, there's not a ton of good options. Just kind of planning in your head for that. You can bookend that eat out meal with good meals. So like at breakfast, make sure you have something good, nutrient dense, etc., that emphasizes whole foods. And same for like dinner. The meal later after that is to bookend it with something that's got lots of colorful nutrients, lots of vegetables, lean proteins. So I call that in a way like checks and balances. You're planning ahead, and you're balancing out your day, and you can work your meals around that specific eat out meal or that specific event. So again, just because you're going to be eating out and maybe eating things that aren't that you would say like, oh yeah, like if I'm trying to improve my eating habits, like eating at a barbecue all the time, yeah, probably not the best. But if it's just one or two, if it's just one event in that day, you can make better choices in those other meals during the day. Again, I like to zoom out and think big picture. But then even at the event or at the restaurant, whatever it might be, there's different strategies. I always say to my clients, like, okay, at events like this, maybe weddings, whatever it might be, you probably don't have control over what is being served to you, but there are some things that you do have control over at that meal. You have control over, for example, the portions that you choose. So building a plate, I use a plate method as well as the hand method for teaching people proper portions when they go out to restaurants or at events. Plate yourself in a way that has proper portions and trying to balance out with getting veggies, getting good carbs, getting proteins. But then of course, like choosing the foods that you want to eat. So portion control is one way, but then another thing that you can do is eat slowly. You have control over that by eating slowly and really taking the time to savor your food, to taste your food, to chew your food, to enjoy your food. In the end, when you eat slowly, you take time to chew your food longer. One, you're going to digest better, but then also by taking time to chew more and enjoy your food, you're going to feel more satisfied. And as a result, you might even eat less. You might overeat less. And so that's another thing that you can practice when you're going out to eat or you're at these events. And then other things you can do, again, kind of depending on the situation and where you're eating or what foods are available, you can try to identify like, hey, using a spectrum. That's something that I love to help people start to think about, is be more mindful and think about foods on a spectrum. Stop thinking about foods as good or bad. There's no morals to foods. Yes, some foods, let's say for example, like an apple has lots of fiber and nutrients in it versus an apple pie, way less nutrients in it, but neither of those foods are good or bad. And depending on the context of the situation, it's okay to enjoy apple pie sometimes, but maybe for like an afternoon snack, you know that an apple is going to make you feel better. But so trying to think about food on a spectrum of like, let's say the worst possible choice, maybe the least nutrient in that choice, and it's probably like the most processed food is like the worst possible choice, but then all the way on the other end of the spectrum is the, like say the best possible choice, where it's like totally minimally processed, like whole foods, like the highest quality. So there's the two ends of the extreme, but then there are some options in the middle. So like there's the worst possible choice, a good enough choice, a pretty good choice, and then maybe there's the best possible choice down here. And so thinking on that spectrum as you are going into a restaurant looking at a menu, or you're going to an event looking at either the menu or the buffet options, like okay, like what are the worst possible choices here, what's like a good enough choice, what's a better choice, what's the best possible choice. And it might take some learning and some education on your part to start to look at food and be able to see on a spectrum and identify like, oh, that's probably not the best choice. Like maybe that's a choice that I don't want to make because I want to feel better. So maybe I don't want to choose the fried chicken, and I really want to try to choose some grilled chicken or some chicken that is more, let's say like just leaner and more nutrient dense and less calorie dense, but starting to use that spectrum at events and identifying like, okay, like what are some like better choices here? What are some better choices for me to choose from? Like what are some better choices for vegetables? What are some better choices for proteins? What are some better choices for carbohydrates? And even thinking about maybe you have a mixture of those. Maybe there's like a specific dish at an event that you know you love. Let's say for example, Thanksgiving. There's this like corn casserole that is phenomenal. I think about the corn casserole, and it's probably a combination of like fats and carbohydrates. And so maybe I really know I want that dish, and so I'm going to choose some lean proteins with the turkey, but maybe get a lots of vegetables and stuff to kind of like balance out my plate and balance out that meal with my choices. But then also thinking about like, what are some really good choices? Like, oh yeah, lots of colorful vegetables, some fresh veggies, but what's maybe not the best choice? Oh yeah, it's going to be a food that is really dense with just like oils and fats and carbs, but it's going to be delicious, and so I want to have it. And so thinking on a spectrum, and within that meal or whatever, or even looking at that menu, you can identify like what are some better choices? What's a way that I can like balance out this meal right now? What are some things I do have control over? What are some things that I do want to choose that are going to make me feel better in my body? There are things you can do, there are things that you can control, but it does take time. It does take effort, honestly, on people's parts, on your part, to learn about these things, to start to actually think about what your choices are, to start to think about and learn about food and what's in food. Good nutrition asks you to be aware of your food choices. It asks you to be aware and learn about what's in food. It asks you to be mindful and intentional and even conscious about your food choices, your eating habits, and your nutrition. So those are some strategies and some tools that you can use to, when you go out to eat, when you go to events. Just because you have events that you're going to doesn't mean your day or your week is completely a wash. Even if it happens to be that you eat out at 2 meals in a day, it doesn't mean that you can't go and have, let's say, a dinner that has good lean proteins, that emphasizes lots of vegetables, and has minimally processed, like high fiber carbohydrates, and choosing a meal that's going to feel good for you and in your body. And then there's also like the next day where you can continue to make choices. When we get into this all or nothing mentality, it really sets us up for failure. So there is work that we need to do also in our mindset, in our thoughts, in our beliefs when it comes to our food and to our eating. And it does take effort on our end. Something, just another aside that I often tell my clients is that the way that I coach and I help people to really like learn and be aware of their eating habits and their thoughts when it comes to food, it's hard. It's actually probably harder than to just follow some plan that tells you exactly what to do, what to eat, when to do it, but that doesn't necessarily set you up for success for the rest of your life with good habits and skills and practices to be able to bring with you so that you can navigate these situations where you're going out to eat, where you're going to events, maybe when you're whatever it might be. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you next time.